Men, Women and Power, a live conversation in the wisdomfactory.net with John Freeman and Professor Dr. Barbara von Meybaum. The event was hosted by Heidi Hörnlein and Mark Davenport in their Italian non-profit association Il Paradiso Integrale. This is part 1 with the topic Gender Roles in the Past and the Abuse of Men.
Hello all, and welcome to the continuing series we call Conversations That Matter in our website, thewisdomfactory.net. I'm Mark Davenport, and here as usual with my mate and motivator, Heidi. Now to our distinguished guests, both of whom we're very honored to have with us. Today, talking about how men and women wield power differently. And to present them in the traditional way, we ask ladies first. Barbara Meybaum from Germany. Say hello, Barbara.
Hello to everybody. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, great. And then to the male member here, John Freeman. Say hi.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Okay. This episode that we're doing today had its origins in an earlier show with Barbara back in April, where she talked about how women handle and express power. And afterwards, we had the suggestion that we should have this discussion with men too, together. And so I didn't want to handle these two powerful ladies all by myself. So I asked John, and he was foolish enough to accept. So
very brave.
Very brave, yes. So we shall see. So we could start the fun by asking each to introduce themselves briefly, but not saying who should go first. How's that work?
I think this time it's John. Last time it was
okay. All right, I'll go for it. So, what do I say about myself? I'm a bit of a generalist in an age where specialists seem to get more approval. I write about all sorts of things, including alternative ways of looking at science and consciousness. I make my living particularly in relation to organizations and organizational development, and I do that based a lot on being something of a spiral dynamics geek. So it will undoubtedly come through in this conversation that somewhere I will talk about stages of development and so on. But yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you, John. And now, Barbara.
Okay, I normally say I walk on 2 feet. I have a scientific background in political science and communication, and I have a background in human psychology and therapy. And I try to connect these 2 dimensions or these 2 axes to the world. I'm leading an institute for the art of leadership. And to me, it's very important to come to a type of relationship between people, which is both self-empowered and attentive and mindful with regard to the other. And so, of course, it's referring as well to the topic of the relationship between men and women, but as well to the topic of the relationship to the power of myself and the use of power of others.
Yeah.
So that's my background.
That's good. And now we can ask questions.
We could ask questions.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. When we talked together with Barbara, we have talked a lot about our upbringing and how women were sort of cut off of their own power. So I would like to hear a little bit the perspective of John and you, how you experienced power as a boy. And then I want to say to the listeners, please go back to the wisdomfactory.net and look for the episode with Barbara from Maybaum, and then you can see all the videos we have done.
Okay,
Just
so you want me to talk about experiencing power as a boy and as a man, which I would certainly start from the place where, personally, I would not say that I had much of an experience of power. Possibly I have done in the last decade a little bit more, but it's seemed to me that there's been a kind of an interesting crossover because of the amount of attention from feminism, that the view of men and what men are and what men should be has become quite fuzzy, I think, and that, you know, you're probably aware there's quite a lot of statistics about how much higher the suicide rate these days is in young males than it is in females, because I think what used to there at least used to be some clarity about what a man's role was in the world, and that has become less so. I was thinking about this whole topic, and a lot of it seems to me that a lot of what we talk about now is taking a slice through our perspective on women's roles that is particularly true of the last 20 or 30 years, and that we tend to look at it from a very much a psychological perspective. And I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, if you go back 100 years, 1 in 5 of men from the United Kingdom died in the First World War. And there's something about the position of men that is also, they're disempowered in a different way. And the way they're expected to express their power is to go out and fight for the family, or was that, and to go down, you know, to go down mines where also lots of men kind of died in really difficult occupations. And so we've had this transition from the way things used to be into the way things are now becoming, which quite rightly involves a new perspective of the position of women in society and in the world, but which has also been quite kind of undermining to whatever the male role is, and to how masculinity is now meant to be expressed.
I'm very grateful to you that you mention the way how the men were brought up in order to fight for something. And I just refer to my latest experiences in constellation work, and it came very evidently to me that after a period where we took a lot of attention to address the female issues, it's high time to address the male issues. Because to me, it was very evident that there's a tremendous abuse of men, which is so far remaining in the unconsciousness. And this abuse in warrior times was to fight for somebody, and in peace times, it's to fight in the business world, which is an abuse too. And the drama to me is that the women tend to adapt to the male perspective, which is one issue, but the other issue is really that men have to discover the degree of abuse which they are subject to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with, may I? Because I look back as a history of my own relationship with power, and I just bought the games that were being played, and I felt powerless when I was low on the totem pole, as they say. And I felt very, very vigorous and potent when I found myself higher on the pole, but I never really questioned the pole for a long time. And so I was really hoping that women would, when I became aware of these issues in the 60s and 70s, I was really hoping that women would change the work world, so that these would no longer be issues and I wouldn't have to deal with them. Well, that's not quite the way it worked out, but that's just how I entered into the conversation. Power. Now that I'm not working, it's completely different. It's a whole different game. I look at the world very differently, but it's very real for many, many men, and it's really nasty. Yeah.
One of the things I think that kind of it was quite present in your previous conversation, Barbara, was the difference between power and empowerment, or power to and power over, or however we express that. And even in the notion of men being trained to fight or expected to fight, there is also an aspect of that which was about the expectation that it's the man's role to protect as well, and that's quite that was actually quite important internally. That was one of the things that would be seen as a validation, if you go back 100 or 200 years, a validation of my position as a man, or to be, now we don't have the concept of the breadwinner, because all sorts of things which are not just changes in mindset, they're also technical changes, like the availability of a contraceptive pill and the invention of washing machines, that have altered the way that that possibilities are present for women to have a different role that wouldn't even have existed back then. And so there's a certain kind of definition which is not just about our shift in mindset. So one of the things that spiral dynamics talks about is our response, our mindset responses are also responses to shifts in life conditions, and the life conditions have been changing.
This is true, but I think it's very important to refer to the virtue aspect of male fighting. The protection aspect. And I think despite any technological advance and despite the pill or the washing machine, there is a need to protect life. This is an ongoing task, which is a task for humanity, and it's a task for men and women with different focuses. What I perceive is that this task of protection has been misused, and not only right now, but for centuries. It has been misused by men, mostly men in power, for their interests. And we are now in a period where this sort of misuse is somehow entzaubert. What is the word? The magic is taken off. Mm-hmm. The magic is taken off. And we can regard what is done with people, men and women. And to me, I have the feeling men have to come to an idea of the misuse they are undergoing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with any of those perspectives or validating the way that men have been. I think I'm just pointing to the fact that we are as much in transition, and effectively we're being called upon, all of us, men, women equally, to have an integration that has not yet happened. I mean, we're all, part of the reason I started from the perspective that I did is that we are all caught up in what spiral dynamics or Integral would call the orange mindset. It's all very technological, it's all very material oriented, it's all very exploitative of the environment and so on.
Men, Women and Power, a conversation with John Freeman, Barbara von Maybaum, Heidi Hörnlein and Mark Davenport at thewisdomfactory.net. The next excerpt is available at http://bit.ly/powermanwomen, all written together.